Behind the smiles and viral videos of the Whittaker family lies a heartbreaking truth. Eric, once inside their world, reveals shocking stories of neglect, abuse, and betrayal. From a trashed Airbnb to stolen donations, from burned furniture to Timmy's forgotten childhood, the reality is far darker than most ever imagined. This isn't just about poverty. It's about survival, exploitation, and the desperate fight for dignity. Today, we pull back the curtain on the struggles the Whittaker family faces every single day. Eric begins by recounting a moment that made the hair stand up on the back of his neck. He had arranged for Patrick, someone close to the Whittakers, to stay in a condo. It was supposed to be a place of healing, a safe space to get away. But when Eric walked in, what he saw disturbed him to his core. The condo was ruined. Pills scattered on the floor. Dog feces tracked into the pillows and sheets. The sink clogged with filth. A vase once meant for flowers had been turned into a spit cup, stained and unusable. And all of this destruction had happened in just a single week. Eric explains that Patrick had told the owner he'd be bringing dogs, but that too was a lie. It was everywhere, Eric says, recalling the mess. In the bed, in the sink, all over. The refrigerator reeked as if everything inside had spoiled overnight. He couldn't shake the thought. If this is how Patrick treated a condo rented by a friend, what was really happening behind closed doors with the Whittaker family? Patrick's lies weren't limited to the condo. Eric reveals that money raised for the Whittakers, thousands of dollars, never made it into their hands. 3,000 of that was the Whittakers' money, Eric says, his voice heavy with disappointment. And I'd been on him for a month and a half. You've got the Whittakers' money. You need to hand it back over. That's not your money, Patrick. But Patrick refused. At best, he sent 2/3 of what was owed. The rest simply disappeared. Eric, realizing the family's survival was at stake, stepped in himself. Out of his own pocket, he paid $662 for the water bill, bought groceries, gave Larry and Ray essentials, and even handed Betty and Larry a prepaid card in case of emergencies. At that point, Eric insists, I had none of their money in my hands, none, I didn't want it. I knew the world was watching. We benefit when we just do the right thing. Still, he couldn't help but notice how deep the problems ran. He had once hoped the money Patrick held on to would eventually be used to repair the Whittakers' home. But as the weeks passed, no sheetrock, no insulation, no progress could be seen. Where's the sheetrock? Where's the insulation? Eric asked. Have you seen any rooms completed? The promises of fixing up the family's home slowly transformed into excuses. Patrick suggested they should fix his house first, and then worry about building a new one for the Whittakers. To Eric, it was a betrayal not just of money, but of trust and hope, and the Whittaker home itself. Eric describes conditions that most people could not imagine. No walls, no insulation. In some places, no floor, just open ground beneath. A structure that barely qualified as a house, yet still the family lived there, exposed to the elements and to unimaginable neglect. Eric remembers the first time he considered staying there. I'm not bougie, he explains, but when I saw the mattress on the porch rolled around in mud, I couldn't do it. I had to get a hotel. For him, a clean place to sleep was all he needed to recharge for the next day. But at the Whittakers' house, even that wasn't possible. As Eric reflects, he admits he had once believed Patrick truly loved Timmy. In the beginning, there seemed to be genuine care. That belief is what kept Eric trying, pushing through the dysfunction and dishonesty. But as time went on, the truth became unavoidable. Patrick wasn't protecting the Whittakers, he was exploiting them. Timmy's story stands out as the most heartbreaking example. For 46 years, Timmy sat on the porch, largely forgotten, neglected. He never had the attention or love most people take for granted. Eric recalls how simple things, showers, meals, coloring books, brought Timmy joy. When Eric showed him affection, like a father figure would, Timmy lit up. I've never seen Timmy that happy, Eric says. He's more like a toddler in an adult's body. He wants to be loved on like a toddler. He never had that dad. He was given coloring books and forgotten on that porch. Eric's time with Timmy showed a stark contrast. Under consistent care, Timmy's head healed from wounds. He was clean, fed, and smiling. Watching Barney on TV, he looked like a different person, not the neglected man the world had once pitied, but someone thriving with just a little love and structure. The deeper Eric went, the darker the truth became. Abuse stories surfaced, Ray being beaten, Timmy attacked by BJ and her boyfriend, others caught in cycles of violence. None of it had ever been reported, and surrounding the family were known sex offenders, including a Whittaker relative who had served over 8 years for assaulting a child. Were Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray in a good environment? Eric asks, his voice heavy. No, yet despite the ugliness, he saw resilience in them. Lorraine, often underestimated, showed a quiet intelligence. She could read people, knew who cared for her, and trusted Eric enough to open up in ways she never did with others. Ray, too, began to respond under Eric's influence. Simple acts like learning to wash his hands after the bathroom became victories. He wanted to copy Eric, to model himself after someone finally showing him a better way, but Patrick undermined all of it. One incident captured the problem perfectly. While helping clean at the Whittaker property, Patrick burned a chair without asking. To him, it was junk. But to BJ, it was her chair, her property. The act caused outrage. You don't just destroy people's belongings, Eric said. Even if it looks like trash to us, it belongs to them. They need to learn to let go of things themselves. That's part of growth, Eric warned Patrick that such behavior could cause trouble. But Patrick refused to admit fault. I'm not doing that, he told Eric. It needed to be thrown away. That refusal to take responsibility summed up so much of what Eric had seen. The lies, the excuses, the exploitation. It wasn't just the Whittakers suffering in poverty. It was people around them using their condition for personal gain. And so, Eric leaves the audience with a sobering reflection. I thought this was a good thing from the outside looking in. Many of you did too. But by the time I got there, I was knee-deep. And I left breadcrumbs along the way because I knew this would implode. It was just going down a bad path. The Whittaker struggles are not just about poverty. They are about betrayal, neglect, and a family whose dignity has been compromised by those claiming to help. And in Eric's words, the most painful truth is clear. Look at what it's cost. What the world saw online as a quirky, lovable family was only the surface. Beneath it were stories of abuse, neglect, and exploitation that had gone on for years. Eric, who once found himself drawn into their world, began uncovering pieces of a puzzle that painted a very different picture. And the more he uncovered, the more he realized that what the Whittakers faced every day was not just poverty, it was a battle for survival. Eric recalls one of the hardest truths he had to face. The protective order that was supposed to shield Betty and her family from abuse never got properly enforced. He admits there was confusion about the court dates, but ultimately, opportunities to ensure safety slipped through the cracks. They were offered 3 different times, Eric explains. Do you want the protective order? And the answer was no. It was at that point Eric realized he was being played. While staying at their property, he noticed things that didn't add up. He and Mark, another supporter, walked around an area called Devil's Backbone. There, Eric spotted 2 fresh campfires. It hadn't been long since they were used. I had a feeling she was still around, Eric admits, referring to someone they thought had left. The family seemed to be hiding more than they were letting on. Eric emphasizes that many outsiders might think, why not just leave this family alone? They survived before, but to him, survival wasn't the same as living well. He lists instance after instance of abuse that had been covered up or ignored. Ray being beaten, Timmy attacked by BJ and her boyfriend, pinned down in a brutal assault. Stories that were never reported to authorities. The more Eric dug, the darker it became. He discovered that in the surrounding area there were at least 5 registered sex offenders. One of them was even a relative, a Whittaker, who had served over 8 years in prison for sexually assaulting a child. And so, Eric poses a painful question. Was Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray truly in a safe environment? His answer is blunt. No, absolutely not. Of the 3, Timmy worried him the most. His entire life had been spent sitting on that porch, largely ignored, denied basic love and care. Eric describes Timmy not just as a grown man with special needs, but more like a toddler in an adult's body, someone who craved affection, attention, and structure. For Eric, seeing Timmy run up to him and hug him for 15 to 20 seconds was unforgettable. The only words Timmy said in that moment were, "Today." Eric had come to understand Timmy's unique way of speaking. That single word meant, "You're coming back for me today." When Eric shook his head no, the look on Timmy's face broke him. He never had that dad, Eric says. He was given coloring books and forgotten on that porch. Eric describes how simple, consistent care transformed Timmy. Under Eric's watch, Timmy showered twice a day. His head wounds healed. He was clean, fed, and smiling. Watching Barney on TV, Timmy looked happier than Eric had ever seen him. He wants to be loved on like a toddler, Eric explains. He ate it up. He never had that attention. This, Eric insists, was the heartbreaking truth. The world saw Timmy in videos and thought he was happy simply being quirky. But in reality, he had been neglected for decades. And when he finally received real attention, the difference was night and day. Eric also saw resilience in Lorraine. While some believe she didn't fully understand what was happening around her, Eric noticed something else. She knows more than people think, he says. She may be selective with her words, but she's very smart. Lorraine, he realized, could read people. She knew who cared for her and who didn't. That's why she spoke differently with Eric than she did with anyone else. When cameras came out and strangers visited, she often went silent. But with Eric, she engaged, because she knew he was looking out for her and her son, Ray. Too, showed potential under Eric's guidance. He recalls a small but powerful moment, teaching Ray to wash his hands after using the bathroom. For most, that seems like nothing. But for Ray, it was a breakthrough. In the beginning, Ray didn't do that, Eric explains. But he wanted to copy me. He wanted to do what I did. Ray needed that one-on-one attention, that patient guidance, to learn even the most basic self-care. But every time Eric tried to build progress with the family, Patrick's actions set them back. One of the clearest examples was the infamous burned chair incident. Patrick had brought a group of people to clean up the Whittaker property. While there, he took one of BJ's chairs, old and tattered, and threw it into a fire. To him, it was trash. To the family, it was their property. BJ was furious. She called Eric directly, shouting, "He burned my chair." Larry and Betty confirmed what happened. Eric confronted Patrick and told him the obvious truth. You don't just destroy people's property. Even if it looks like junk to you, it belongs to them. They need to make those choices themselves. Eric even tried to offer a solution. Go on Marketplace, find a comparable chair, and replace it. There are even people giving away chairs for free. Just replace what you destroyed? But Patrick refused. I'm not doing that, he told Eric flatly. It needed to be thrown away. That refusal to take responsibility infuriated Eric. To him, it wasn't about the chair, it was about respect. Respect for the family's dignity, for their right to decide what happens with their belongings. Even if outsiders considered them worthless, this moment became symbolic of the larger problem. Patrick, while publicly presenting himself as a helper, repeatedly disrespected the family, used their situation for gain, and refused accountability. Eric's frustration grew as he realized the family wasn't just suffering from poverty, they were suffering from exploitation by people around them. Money raised in their name didn't reach them. Promises made to build them a home fell apart. And all the while, abuse and neglect continued behind closed doors. The donations issue weighed heavily on Eric. He recalls creating a contract that explicitly stated 100% of donations were to go directly to the Whittaker family. Both cash and physical gifts were meant solely for them. Yet, by the time Eric confronted the situation, he realized that Betty and Larry hadn't received much, if any, of the donation money. He began asking supporters, if you ever sent money, put it in the chat. It needs to be accounted for. He knew people had given. He saw the messages. Friends, family, and strangers had all chipped in because they believed in helping. But the funds were untraceable. Eric contrasts this with his own actions when he asked for support. At one point, he raised money to help with an Airbnb. As soon as he had enough, he told people, stop sending. He didn't want excess money, because he knew what came with it: questions, accountability, and responsibility. I wasn't prepared to take that hit, Eric admits. But for those of you that helped so I could stay here, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Eric draws another contrast between Timmy and the others. Some critics asked why he spent so much time with Timmy and not with Ray or Lorraine. His answer was candid. Timmy was easier. You don't have to watch over him much, Eric says. You can tell him to sit and eat a bologna sandwich while you do other things. With Ray and Lorraine, it's work. Hands-on, constant attention. He remembers one night after taking Ray to the movies. Ray had popcorn and Coca-Cola for the first time. On the way home, Eric heard a sound. "Oh my God," he said. "Ray just puked?" Larry insisted. It was only a burp. But when they arrived home, Eric discovered puke all over his back seat. At 1 a.m, Eric was outside with gloves on, scrubbing his car. "That's work," Eric explains. Ray is going to use the bathroom anywhere. He needs constant one-on-one attention, and that, Eric believes, is why Patrick gravitated toward Timmy. Timmy was easier to parade in videos, easier to justify needing money for outings, easier to exploit. He sat on that porch for 46 years, Eric says. He's just happy to be in your presence. He doesn't need all these outings. Read him a book. Teach him how to shave. Be a dad. Instead, Patrick used Timmy as a tool. If he wanted to ask for donations, he framed it as something Timmy wanted, whether it was trips, activities, or even outrageous claims like taking Timmy skydiving. Patrick spun it into a justification for fundraising. Eric shakes his head as he recalls one text message. "I'm taking Timmy skydiving." It was a clear example of how far things had spiraled. The image Patrick projected, a down-home country boy just trying to help, was a mask. Behind it, he was exploiting the very family he claimed to care for. Eric admits he knew about Patrick's criminal record. Even then, he went out of his way to give him a chance, hoping things would change. But in the end, the lies and betrayals outweighed everything. "I don't wish ill will," Eric says. "I hope you get it straightened out, but I can't go down for what you've been doing. Look at what it's caused." Betty and Larry were about to get a new home. And now, because of the lies, it's all falling apart. Eric reflects on why he even came in the first place. Betty and others had told him they wanted the protective order. They asked for help. He drove up from Georgia immediately, believing Patrick couldn't handle it with his broken leg. And Larry wouldn't take action because he didn't want BJ in trouble. Once there, Eric realized the situation was far more complicated. Betty, intimidated by Larry and by the dysfunction surrounding her, spoke more openly to Eric than she had before. And that's when Eric saw the bigger picture. The Whittakers weren't just struggling with poverty, they were trapped in a cycle of neglect, abuse, and exploitation that outsiders rarely saw. "We were all here to help," Eric concludes. "We were all here to get the home built. But look at where it ended up. Look at what it's cost." Behind the viral fascination with the Whittaker family is a darker reality few wanted to see. Eric, who entered their world with hope and compassion, found himself unraveling story after story of dysfunction, abuse, and betrayal. What began as an attempt to help became a window into cycles of neglect that had gone on for decades. Eric starts part 3 with a painful acknowledgement. The deeper he got involved, the more he realized how impossible it would be to fix everything. "I came in with good intentions," he says. "By the time I found out the truth, I was already knee-deep. We were in the public eye. I had built relationships with Timmy and the family. I couldn't just walk away. But I also couldn't ignore what I was seeing, and what he saw was a family constantly caught between love and chaos, between people who cared for them and people who exploited them. The heartbreaking reality of Timmy to Eric. The saddest part was Timmy, for 46 years. Timmy had been left to sit on the porch, largely forgotten, neglected by those who were supposed to care for him, ignored by the system, and used as a prop by outsiders who wanted money or views. When Eric stepped in, he realized Timmy wasn't just quirky or different, he was more like a toddler in an adult's body, someone who longed for simple affection, A hug, a word of encouragement. Consistent care. Eric describes moments that revealed Timmy's innocence. When Timmy hugged him tightly and said, "Today," Eric knew what he meant. "You're coming back for me today, right?" That single word captured a lifetime of yearning for love and security. Eric explains how much Timmy changed with just a little care. He showered regularly, his wounds healed, and he smiled more. Watching Barney on television became a highlight of his day. "I've never seen Timmy that happy," Eric recalls. He wanted to be loved on. He wanted to be held. He ate it up because he never had that before. But Timmy's vulnerability also made him the easiest target for exploitation. Patrick, Eric says, used Timmy's name whenever he needed justification for donations. Trips, outings, even outrageous claims like skydiving, they were all framed as, for Timmy. He was just a tool to keep the money flowing, Eric says bitterly. And the sad part is, Timmy didn't need all of that. He just needed someone to care for him. Read him a book. Teach him how to shave. Be a dad, Loren's quiet strength. While Timmy broke Eric's heart, Lorraine surprised him. Many assumed she was unaware of what went on around her, but Eric quickly realized she was sharper than most believed. She knew more than people gave her credit for, Eric says. She may not always say much, but she knows who's looking out for her. He recalls how she behaved differently around him than she did around others. When strangers showed up with cameras, Lorraine often stayed quiet, avoiding eye contact. But with Eric, she would engage. She trusted him. She could sense his sincerity, that quiet strength Eric believes has been overlooked for years. People underestimated her, but Lorraine knew who cared and who didn't. Ray's struggle ray presented a different challenge. For him, everyday life required constant guidance. Basic tasks like washing hands after the bathroom had to be taught step by step. Yet Eric noticed that Ray wanted to learn. He wanted to imitate Eric, to copy his habits. That was big progress, Eric says. Ray didn't do that at first. But once I started showing him, he began to get it. He wanted to do what I did. He just needed someone to give him that one-on-one attention, but that kind of attention took time and patience. And in Eric's eyes, it was work that Patrick wasn't willing to do. He tells the story of the night after the movies. Ray had popcorn and Coca-Cola for the first time in his life. On the way home, Eric heard a noise. "Oh my God," he said. "Ray just puked?" Larry insisted it was just a burp. But when they got home, Eric found vomit all over the back seat and floor of his car. At 1 a.m, Eric was outside with rubber gloves, scrubbing his vehicle. "That's work," Eric explains. "Ray is going to use the bathroom anywhere. He needs hands-on, constant attention, and that's why he didn't get it. Because it's not easy," the burn chair incident. Chair became a symbol of everything wrong with how the family was treated. Patrick had gone to the Whittakers' property with a group, supposedly to help clean. At some point he threw one of BJ's chairs into a fire. To him, it was trash. To BJ, it was hers. "She called me screaming," Eric recalls. "He burned my chair." Then Larry and Betty confirmed it too. Patrick never asked anyone. "He just burned it," Eric confronted Patrick. "You can't do that," he told him. "That's their property. Even if it looks like junk, it's theirs. They need to learn to let go themselves." Eric even suggested a solution. "Go on Marketplace, find a comparable chair, and replace it. People are giving away furniture all the time. Just make it right." But Patrick refused. "I'm not doing that," he said. It needed to be thrown away. For Eric, that refusal summed up the problem. It wasn't about the chair. It was about respect. The Whittakers already lived in poverty, already faced neglect. To have someone come in and destroy what little they had, then refuse to make it right, was devastating. That's the attitude that destroys them, Eric says. People don't treat them like they have rights, like their stuff matters. But it does. Because they matter. The money trail. Eric's frustration grew as he pieced together what happened with donations. He had drafted a contract that clearly stated 100% of donations go directly to the Whittakers. No exceptions. Yet as time went on, he realized the family wasn't receiving much, if any. of the funds sent in their name. People sent money because they trusted, Eric explains. They thought it was going to help the family. But Betty and Larry weren't seeing it. He began asking supporters publicly, "If you ever sent money, put it in the chat. It needs to be accounted for." He knew people had given. He saw the messages. He knew there were hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars unaccounted for. But he could never get a straight answer about where it went. That weighed heavily on Eric. When he himself asked for help with Airbnb expenses, he stopped the donations as soon as he had enough. "I wasn't prepared to take that hit," he admits. "But I didn't want excess money, because I knew what came with it. Questions, accountability, and I wanted to keep it clean." But Patrick didn't stop. Donations kept coming in. Excuses piled up. Promises went unfulfilled. And the Whittakers remained in poverty, without even basic repairs to their home. Cycles of abuse and neglect. The hardest part, Eric admits, was seeing how abuse and neglect were normalized. He recalls hearing about Ray being beaten, about Timmy being attacked by BJ and her boyfriend, pinned down and struck, about severe mistreatment that was never reported to authorities, and it wasn't just within the family. The surrounding area was filled with predators, including registered sex offenders. One was even a Whittaker relative who had served more than 8 years in prison for sexually assaulting a child. Eric knew what this meant. The Whittakers weren't just poor. They were vulnerable, surrounded by danger, with little to no protection. Was that a safe environment for Timmy, Lorraine, and Ray? Eric asks. Absolutely not. The breaking point by now, Eric had reached a crossroads. He wanted desperately to help. But he also realized he was caught in a web of dysfunction and lies. "I thought this was a good thing from the outside looking in," he reflects. "And many of you did too. But once I got there, I saw the truth. And I knew it was going to implode. That's why I left breadcrumbs. Because it was going down a bad path." He remembers reading about BJ and the Protective Services visit. He wanted the full video released, not just clips. "Let the world see what really happened," he urged, but he knew it was too late. The lies had piled up. The donations had vanished. The family was still living in squalor, and the people who could have made a difference chose to exploit them instead. Eric's reflection. Eric leaves his audience with a sobering message. "Look at what it's cost," he says. Betty and Larry were about to get a new home. And now, because of lies and betrayal, it's all fallen apart. He reflects on why he came in the first place. Betty had asked for help. She said she wanted the protective order. He drove up from Georgia immediately, believing Patrick couldn't handle it with his broken leg, and Larry wouldn't take action because he didn't want BJ in trouble. But once he arrived, he saw the deeper truth. Betty spoke more openly, sharing her fears. Eric realized she was intimidated, caught in a cycle she couldn't break free from. And that's when he understood. The Whittakers weren't just struggling with poverty. They were trapped in dysfunction, surrounded by people who exploited them, and abandoned by the systems that should have protected them. "We were all here to help," Eric says quietly. "We were all here to get the home built. But look at where it ended up. Look at what it's cost, behind the curiosity and viral attention." The Whittaker family's struggles are not entertainment. They are a stark reflection of what happens when poverty, neglect, and exploitation collide. In this final part, Eric shares the breaking points, the betrayals, and the lessons he wants the world to hear. The burnout of false promises. Eric recalls the endless cycle of promises that never turned into action. Money raised for the Whittakers' home disappeared. Weeks passed with no repairs made, no sheetrock or insulation purchased, no progress visible. At first, the goal was clear: build the Whittakers a proper home. But somewhere along the way, the mission shifted. Patrick began talking about fixing his own house instead, suggesting that maybe the Whittakers could stay with him for the winter while he worked on it. To Eric, that was the final betrayal. It started with building them a home, he says, and it ended with fixing his house. That was never the deal. He explains how the Amish community could have built the family a home more quickly and more efficiently than patching Patrick's crumbling house. But the opportunity slipped away because funds were diverted and the truth was twisted. House of Secrets. Eric describes Patrick's own home as just as unlivable as the Whittakers. No walls, no insulation. Sections of the floor gone, exposing bare ground beneath. A structure more like a shell than a home. The first time he asked me to stay there, I considered it, Eric recalls. I'm not bougie. I don't need much. Just a clean place to sleep and recharge. But when I got there, I couldn't do it. There was a mattress on the porch rolled in mud. I ended up getting a hotel, even though I couldn't really afford it. That memory stuck with Eric because it reflected the pattern he kept seeing, outward promises and appearances covering up deep dysfunction. The chair, the fires, and the disrespect. The burned chair incident lingered as a symbol of everything that was wrong. Eric says it wasn't about the object itself, but about respect and dignity. You don't just go into someone's home and start throwing out their stuff, he says firmly. Even if it looks like junk to us, it belongs to them. And part of growth is learning to make those choices yourself. If you destroy their property without permission, you're not helping them, you're hurting them. Eric reflects on how many times outsiders came in, claiming to fix the Whittakers only to disrespect them in the process. Each act of carelessness stripped away more of their dignity. And in communities like this, dignity is one of the only things left. The Ring camera and Adult Protective Services. At one point, ADULT Protective Services visited the family. Eric insists the entire video should be released, not just clips. Let people see what really happened, he says. Not just the parts someone wants them to see. He emphasizes how critical it is for transparency. Too many times, the family's struggles were hidden, manipulated, or presented in ways that served outsiders instead of truth. Eric wanted the whole picture exposed, so people could understand just how bad things really were. The exploitation of Timmy's story continues to haunt Eric for decades. Timmy was treated like a burden, given coloring books to keep him occupied and left to sit on the porch. But when Eric stepped in, he saw how simple acts of love transformed Timmy. He showered, ate well, healed from wounds, and smiled with genuine joy. Watching Barney on TV, he looked like a child experiencing happiness for the first time. Timmy's more like a toddler, Eric explains. He wants affection, attention, structure, and he never had that. When I hugged him, when I treated him like a son, he lit up. He never had that dad. And that's the truth, yet Patrick turned Timmy into a fundraising tool. Whenever he wanted to justify money, he tied it to Timmy. Outings, trips, even bizarre ideas like skydiving, all were framed as, for Timmy. He didn't need all that, Eric says. He just needed love. Read him a book. Teach him how to shave. Be a dad. Instead, he was exploited for money and content. The toll of abuse beyond neglect. Eric uncovered disturbing stories of abuse. Ray being beaten. Timmy attacked. Pinned down like an MMA fighter. BJ striking him on the head. None of it was reported. None of it investigated. And all the while, registered sex offenders lived nearby, including a Whittaker relative who had served more than 8 years in prison for sexual assault on a child. Eric makes the point clearly. This wasn't a safe environment. Not for Timmy, not for Lorraine, not for Ray. They weren't just living in poverty. They were living in danger. The cost of silence. One of Eric's deepest frustrations was how silence allowed the cycle to continue. If this had been any other family, he says, people would have sounded the alarm a long time ago. But because it was the Whittakers and people loved their personalities, it got overlooked. Ray, Lorraine, and Timmy are lovable, Eric explains. Their quirks, their mannerisms, their innocence made people see them as unique. But that same love blinded many from recognizing the abuse and neglect right in front of them. They sat in urine. In feces, they weren't cared for. And the people getting money to take care of them weren't doing it. That's the truth. The fallout with Patrick. Eric's relationship with Patrick eventually collapsed under the weight of lies and betrayal. He had tried to confront him about the money, about the exploitation, about the disrespect. He begged him to stop spending funds that weren't his. But Patrick refused. I don't wish ill will, Eric says. I hope you get it straightened out, but I can't go down for what you've been doing. Look at what it's caused. Betty and Larry were about to get a new home, and now it's all gone. Eric explains that he left breadcrumbs along the way because he knew things would implode. He wanted people to see the warning signs for themselves, and when it finally did unravel, Eric stepped back. He had reached his breaking point, a message about dignity for Eric. The final lesson wasn't just about poverty, abuse, or betrayal. It was about dignity. The Whittakers deserve dignity, he says. They deserve to be treated like human beings, not freak shows, not fundraising props, not viral content. He explains how he intentionally stayed out of photos when people asked for pictures with the family. I wanted them to have their moment. I wanted them to be seen as people, not as a spectacle. That, Eric believes, is what the world has missed. Amid all the fascination and viral attention, the Whittakers are real people, and their struggles deserve respect. The final reflection Eric closes with raw honesty. I thought this was a good thing at first. From the outside looking in, it seemed like we were helping. But once I got inside, I saw the truth, and it broke me. We all came to help. We all wanted to see a new home built. But look at what it's cost. He pauses, then adds, this isn't just about poverty. It's about survival. It's about exploitation. It's about dignity. And until people start seeing the Whittakers as human beings, not props, not spectacles, not content, nothing will ever change. Eric's words hang heavy in the air. They are not just a testimony of what he witnessed, but a warning. A warning about how easily compassion can be twisted into exploitation, how quickly love can be used as a mask for abuse, and how silence allows neglect to thrive. Behind the smiles and viral videos lies the heartbreaking truth. And Eric, after living it firsthand, leaves us with a message we cannot ignore. The Whittakers deserve more than pity. They deserve protection. They deserve love. And above all, they deserve dignity. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.